Listen, do me a favor. If you are here, if this is a blessing to you, please like, subscribe, and comment. And share it on your socials. We believe that if this blesses you, it'll bless someone else. Tonight's lesson is Know the Battlefield, and I am so excited to have our guest with us today. I have known James for quite some time. He has always been not just a cousin, but he has always been a friend. And he is one of the best cooks you will ever find in your life. And if you've tasted his barbecue, you know that he does not play. But also along with that, James has had a significant history, both of honorable military service as well as a current sheriff's deputy. So please welcome Brother James Taylor. Thank you, Jay, for joining us.
Yes, sir.
So today's lesson is called Know the Battlefield. We're in the Art of War, and it's loosely based on a famous war strategy book by Sun Tzu. So I figured it would be really good. It would be a really good starter to start with someone who's actually served in the military. And I don't know if this is a cliche, but first, thank you for your service.
Yes,
Someone who actually has kind of that background. We hear in church, somebody just sang this the other day at church, I'm a soldier in the army of the Lord. But there's significant difference between God's army and the actual military of any country. So welcome, James. I appreciate you coming out with us.
Yes, sir. Glad to be here.
So the quote that we start off with Sun Tzu is, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. And so what I wanted to talk about today is we're going to kind of highlight the relationship between knowing your battlefield. Of course, in the military, that could be like geographic areas. But in this battle, the spiritual battle, it's more about knowing yourself. It's about knowing your mind, because that's where the real battle takes place. So James, I wanted you to talk to us real quickly about, well, not real quickly, take as much time as you need, but about Recon. Like, what does Recon mean from a military perspective? And like, for somebody who may not have any military experience, may not have even heard that word before, would you kind of explain what that's all about?
Yes. So reconnaissance in military perspective, it's very important. The reason why is because when we go to war with an adversary, or we're going into any type of conflict with the adversary, what you see and what is the facts on the ground can be two completely different things. And for that purpose, we deploy units behind enemy lines, and their job is to gain information about the terrain. They're gaining information about the enemy. They're gaining information about the civilian population in that area. Does the civilian population support, whatever organization might be up in that area? Do they not? There's oftentimes in different places in Afghanistan and Iraq where they wanted the Taliban gone just as much as we did. And then there were others where they were reluctant to have any American input into the area. And so with this information, because the people who go behind the line and get the information, they're the most important people. The people making the decisions rely on good information of those who go behind the line, so that they can come up with a plan and a ski of maneuver. And that becomes important when we're looking at how are we going to deploy. What are things that we have kind of in our back pocket that we can use in this area that the adversary might not know that we even have capabilities for? And, are we going to be able to deploy some of this stuff in this area? And oftentimes, good recon is what's going to create a successful mission. If you have bad recon, the mission, there's a saying that one of the generals said a long time ago that no plan of attack survives first contact. And basically what that means is we can sit here and we can play board games with what we're going to do with our troops, but the minute we make entry, that plan has gone out the window. And when that plan goes out that window, when we start to develop a plan in the midst of a situation, that's when we have to go back to the recon that we got before, and that allows us the opportunity to kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? we can get in there and kind of just wing it essentially, but with good intel, so we're not really winging it.
Yeah. So I mean, and that's one of the things that, and the military is all about this. Why preparation is so important. So that when you're in that situation where things may be different than you originally spotted. Nowadays they use satellite photos, videos, they use drone footage, but when you're on the ground, it might be completely different. And that's one of the reasons why training is so important, because it allows you to respond in a viable way when things might be different from what you experienced,
yes,
kind of in that boardroom, the draft room, or what have you.
So 2 key points on that. 2 things that they tell us in the military is most people practice till they get it right. We practice till we can't get it wrong. And that's important because anybody can do it once, but can you do it day in and day out for months at a time? That's a huge difference. Another saying that they use a lot is, you do not rise to the occasion. A lot of people believe that when push comes to shove, they're going to become Superman and they're going to be able to execute in a manner that they've never done before. And what the military tells us is that's not going to happen. And you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the highest level of your training. So if you want to be Superman, you have to train like Superman. You're not just going, it's not just going to come to you like that.
Listen, that'll preach right there. So like you will fall to the highest level of your training. I have to look up that scripture because I do not have it memorized. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 9 and 27, he says, I discipline my body in some versions, and he says in one version, I actually buffet my body, like I actually will whip on my body until I get it right, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified. And basically with what you just said is it's kind of like a lot of times spiritually we are not adequately prepared. So growing up in church, people spend a lot of their time in church training and being important. And that's no shade, but that's what a lot of it is. A lot of it is they come to church and they have a position they may not have in the outside world. And so it's almost like people get so involved in their position in church, they really lose sight that what we're really doing in our church settings, what we're really supposed to be doing, is training for warfare. And oftentimes it seems like people make enemies out of people in the church and forget that they have a real enemy. So when you talked about training, and I have my notes to go into this area kind of a little later, but I wanted to run this by you. One of the things that, from my reading, basic training is formulated to show you things about yourself you didn't know.
Yes.
And if I'm wrong, please jump in. But it seems like the exercises, they're designed to teach you teamwork, but they're also designed to show you things about yourself that you might not know, like fears that you didn't know you had. Is that fair to say?
Yes. So one of the big things they stress from the jump is we've got to break all of you down to your lowest point so that we can build you up as a team. Because when you first get there, you start off in a platoon of 80 people, and we're 80 individuals. We come from all over the country, all different backgrounds and walks of life. And they break us down because they're trying to build us up together as a team, because ultimately the team dynamic is what makes us so powerful, is the team, the strength, what did they say? The strength of the wolf is the pack?
Yeah.
It's something like that. And so they do it like that. Also, to expose weakness. One of the things that I learned just in my time in boot camp, and our drill instructor said a lot, was pain retains, and through pain comes discipline. And they would tell us that because a lot of times, if you think of like a kid, you can discipline a child multiple times, but sometimes a good smack on the hand is what it takes to shift that behavior. Or when a kid reaches up on the stove and touches a hot stove, that's the last time they ever do that in their life. Yeah. And it's because the pain they felt then is a pain that they don't want to feel. And so the military implements that pain on us in boot camp, and that is how we're able to go throughout our careers following orders and being disciplined, because the pain we felt then is a pain that we don't want to revisit for the rest of our careers, and that's kind of the focus. Also, fear, the fear you feel in boot camp. A lot of people are scared of their drill instructors. I was scared of my drill instructors. Anybody that knows me knows I'm not a big swimmer. I don't really like the water. But when we got to the pool, my two options were don't jump in the water and get yelled at by drill instructors, or jump in the water and figure it out. And I jumped in and figured it out. And because of that, I gained a lot of confidence in what I was doing. And so by the time we walked through different, there's 3 phases in boot camp, and it's 13 weeks long. And as we went through boot camp, I could feel the confidence building, where things I was intimidated by on paper, I was no longer intimidated by those things when I was confronted with them in real life. And it was because everything that I had learned up to that point gave me strength, gave me confidence, and I was able to make it through all of that kind of stuff.
So one thing that kind of really hit me as you were talking, and I really feel the presence of God in this, that one of the reasons why God allows some of the things that happen in church is because he is training us in the way that you talk about. You know, it's real easy to say that, you know, even kind of what I just said, like, you know, sometimes people are stuck on their own power. But from looking at it from the perspective that you just gave, it's like God may want people like that in our churches, so that you are trained in an area that is basically safer than real combat. And some people are supposed to rub you the wrong way. Some people are you're supposed to have some conflict, because what God is doing, God is allowing those people to help you through pain. He is helping you through that pain that brings discipline. So I honestly, that just gave me kind of really a different shift on how I thought about that. And I feel like for some of our people watching as well, who've experienced things in church and who may have kind of experienced anything from embarrassment, hurt, backbiting, talking, like, you don't always realize that those types of encounters are making you stronger.
Yes.
Wow, that's deep. Thank you so much. Our theme today, every warrior studies the battlefield, but in spiritual warfare, the greatest mistake is assuming that the war is out there. In politics, culture, the news, the truth is far more personal, in that the enemy's objective is not our streets, it's our souls. The front lines aren't in your city, they're in your mind. His plan doesn't begin with external chaos, it begins with internal compromise. So Ephesians 6 opens with, be strong in the Lord and the power of his might, because the war is spiritual. It manifests emotionally, mentally, relationally, and behaviorally. But until you realize that the battlefield is you, you'll keep blaming the wrong things, the wrong people, and fighting the wrong way. So to kind of go back to the Recon, I think what gets a lot of people in trouble is that they don't really know themselves.
Yes.
And so you talked about that both from the basic training aspect, how you learn a lot about yourself. You talked about how, not wanting to hear that drill instructor yell, like you made decisions to figure it out, which was like, I can see this in my head. I was in ROTC in high school, and we were in Naval ROTC, and Master Chief Petty Officer Clark would yell at us with the best of ones. And if the principal had probably heard some of the things that went on in ROTC, he probably would have got disciplined. But at the same time, kind of similar, and I don't relate that to your military experience at all, but that's literally the only experience I have that kind of relates to
And
it.
it's pretty accurate. I'd say it's pretty accurate.
But like, as a platoon, that gave us more discipline, for fear of being called out in front of your whole platoon. You did your best to I mean, so the discipline, of being asked to run after marching, you really quickly learn. You better listen. You better follow whatever commands you're being given. And then, so like I said, that drill instructor kind of persona, that really kind of makes me think differently about this whole thing. But so in this spiritual battle, what we really need to learn is ourselves. And I always say this in my ministry, that I'll be transparent, so you don't have to be. But some of my biggest failings, even as a man, as a minister, have come when I didn't know my own responses. And so kind of from the military perspective, what are some of the things that you might have learned about yourself that you didn't know when you went into boot camp, when you went into the military? Are there some things that you learned about yourself that you didn't know going into it, that those experiences brought out in you?
Yes. So I was very much, and I didn't know this about myself, I was very much a complacent person. I was the type of person who did only things that I'm comfortable with, never did any more than that for fear of humiliation or fear of failure. Failure was a huge thing. Even now, it's one of those things that I still battle with, not doing something simply because there's like that small piece in me that's like, but what if I fail? And I'll never forget, after the Crucible, which is the culminating event in the Marine Corps, after you've done all the training and you've met all the requirements, you march to the Iwo Jima Monument. And that's when you receive your Eagle, Globe, and Anchor. And that is what signifies you as a Marine. And one of my drill instructors came up to me and he said, the reason why, because I always thought, man, they are hard on me for some reason. Like, I feel like I did worse than everybody else in the platoon. And he came up to me and he said, the reason why I was so hard on you is because you wouldn't push yourself, so I had to push you. And so there was times where, there was times where the only reason why I didn't quit was because I couldn't show back up home with my granddaddy, who was a Marine, and tell him that I couldn't make it. And it would get that brutal sometimes, and I would always wonder why. And it put into perspective when he said, you wouldn't push yourself, so I had to push you. And now that I've pushed you, you know what you're capable of. And I left boot camp very confident and very capable in the things that I had learned there. But not only there, but it gave me what I needed from the lessons that my parents had taught me even before that. And so that was one of those things that I realized, man, I always was comfortable just doing kind of the bare minimum. If I was good at something, I would do it. If I wasn't even going to take the time to try. And so that was probably the biggest lesson I learned about myself.
That's amazing. So in this kind of battle, one of the best things that you can do is to be honest with yourself. And you talked about how, like, the plans, once you engage in combat, the plans go out the window. And I think that happens spiritually as well. But one of the things that we can do is, I think that hopefully people walk away with this, that know yourself.
Yes.
Like, see these opportunities for what they are. Whether it's, church hurt, that's a big topic with people who get hurt in church for some reason. But we rarely take the time to recognize that those might actually be opportunities for us to learn a lot about ourselves. And so I just think we rarely see those things for the blessing that they are. And if we allow them, what God promises is that all things will work together for our good. And that means that whatever is happening, whether it's good or bad, He will use it for our good in the end. And so, kind of relates to me the story you gave about your drill instructor. Like, he came up to you and said, here's why I pushed you. And a lot of times I feel like once we pass whatever test it is, we'll understand better why we had gone through so many trials before that. And so that reflection is priceless. First point is know your enemy. The devil doesn't show up in obvious ways. He comes through whispers. He comes through compromise. He comes through chronic busyness and unresolved pain. His weapon isn't just temptation, it's strategy. The enemy is subtle, intelligent, observant. James, you talked about reconnaissance, knowing the terrain before contact. That determines whether you walk into danger, informed, or ambushed. But in spiritual warfare, we often engage in the fight blind, especially when driven and spiritually unprepared, because we haven't done recon of ourselves or our surroundings. Paul says in 2 Corinthians 2:11, we are not ignorant of Satan's devices, but too often we are. We chalk up our setbacks to anxiety or personalities, or distractions or busy seasons, but in the end, we really just don't recognize what's going on inside of ourselves. Here's the kicker. The enemy has done recon on you. He knows what wounds are still unhealed. He knows what temptations still linger, what cycles haven't been broken. He doesn't need to create a new attack if you're still vulnerable to the old one. Until you study the terrain in your soul, you will always be surprised by the attacks that aren't new, just recycled. And I think that for those of us who might feel like even stuck spiritually, it's realizing that the enemy doesn't even give you the respect of coming up with new problems. Like he just keeps recycling the same old attacks because they work. So from a strategy standpoint, how does that relate to kind of what you learned in the military?
So I'll give a story about Kings Bay, Georgia. That's where I was stationed at the first portion of my time in the Marine Corps. And without going into too many details, it's a nuclear weapons base, and we guarded nuclear weapons, and we loaded nuclear weapons on submarines and sent them out to sea. And there came a time, probably around 2017, that some of our adversaries would fly drones around the nuclear weapon areas, and what they were doing is recon. And they're not the drones you think of, like, you know, your neighbor's drone that you can see. These are drones that are so far up in the atmosphere that without having the domes we have over our bases, you wouldn't know that they were there. And I remember asking one of my lieutenants, hey, when a drone comes into the waterfront, which is where we were, why do we deploy? We're deploying, and now this drone can see now, oh, when they have an irregularity, this is what they do. This Bearcat goes to this place, this Bearcat goes to this place, and so forth and so on. I said, we're giving up our hand in an attack that's not even happening yet. I feel like there's a much smarter thing that we can do that doesn't necessarily show them what all we have at our disposal. And they went and had a command staff meeting, and they came back and they changed our whole standard operating procedures that we no longer deploy for a drone. We actually have this device called a PAS-28. It's a night vision goggle system, and it can shoot for miles. And we would monitor the drone monitoring us, but they weren't able to get any more information than there's somebody standing on the roof aiming a PAS-28 at me. And we did that, and after putting that into effect, we went back and changed the way we deployed, so whatever recon they were able to gain before this was no longer accurate. And so if they were to plan an attack, or if they had ever decided to act on one of our nuclear weapons, what they would be met with is something that they've never seen before. And it gave us all a peace of mind that we wouldn't be walking into slaughter because they recorded us 1,000,000 times doing the same thing over and over and over again.
So I think that for us spiritually, the kind of parallel to that is, if we react the way we've always reacted, the enemy's recon, they don't need to do anything new because they've already got recon on us. So I think that from the story that you just gave, which was, I'm going to be saying like this, which is courageous, because sometimes you get ridiculed for offering suggestions, especially when people feel like they're right. But I think that that happened the best possible way that it could, because they actually took really solid advice. It's seriously very solid. So I think that for those of us spiritually, our really kind of goal needs to be to react differently to a similar situation. And that is going to take both you and God operating in your life. If the enemy knows what can get you upset, he'll throw it at you every time. If the enemy knows what will get you kind of roped in with lust, they're going to throw the same thing at you every time. If they know what's going to make you, have fear, they're going to throw the same thing at you every time. So our goal has to be, one of our prayers has to be, God, help me to react differently when I'm faced with that again. And I think that kind of is that fair to what?
Yeah. I think one of the most important things about military operations just in general is we do what's called an after-action report. And we do that because we successfully handled a situation doesn't mean that there's not vulnerabilities there. A lot of people think because I made it out of this situation, I'll do it the same way the next time. We do after-action reports because we can look at what we did good, what we did bad, and then change it so that the next time presented with the same situation, we handle it better. And then if we presented with that situation again, we handle it even better than we did before then. And before you know it, you're teetering on the line of perfection with how you can handle certain situations because we've taken inventory of all the things and we've taken an aggressive action to remedy, whatever shortcomings we might have had.
That's good. So if you've made it through a test, go back and review how you did. Be honest with yourself. Kind of have that self-evaluation, and that's one of the tools that I think we rarely have. I'll say this: your mom and I, we do evaluation after we preach, and so we'll sit back and we'll say, okay, how did that go? Did that come across? Like, what could I have done differently? And sometimes that's some of the most helpful things because actually you're sitting down with somebody who does what you do. So I don't think I've ever said that like in public before, but as a minister, I go back and look at what I did well and what I could have done differently. More so, I need to have that. I need to have people in my life who I can do that with spiritually. That's one of the things that, again, the Bible says it like this: confess your faults one to another. And that's in our goal to perfection spiritually. But when that open confession doesn't just mean you go tell all your business. It means that you talk through what happened so that the next time you can make different decisions. So that the next time, even if you survived, you can do better. And so I think that'll be helpful for all of us to kind of really take into account that we're doing that after. And what'd you say it was called again? After the action?
After action report.
Okay, after action report. So let's have some spiritual after action reports and look at how we did in the last test. Our point number 2, know yourself. You don't fight for victory, you fight from it. This truth is foundational, but here's the reality. You can't fight from your position in Christ if you don't actually know who's operating in you. Knowing yourself on one battlefield doesn't mean knowing your spiritual identity. It means understanding your patterns, your proclivities, your temptations, and your triggers. And it makes sense that you're the battlefield. So the terrain of war isn't just spiritual skies, it's soul sensitive. And we talked about basic training and how that reveals what's in you. So my question to you, the audience, is what in your life could God have been using just to show you what was in yourself? What in your life, that thing that you even prayed to God and asked God to change, what could God have been using that for to really understand yourself better? And that's one thing that I think we can all look back on. It gets dangerous when the enemy knows what's in your file. He's done recon. If you don't know what your triggers are, he does. If you don't know what you're prone to, he remembers. And so Sun Tzu said, if you know yourself and you know the enemy, you need not fear the outcome of 100 battles. But if you forget either one, you're in trouble. Many believers have spiritual amnesia. They forget what God brought them out of. They forget how quickly and easily they used to fall. So God's boot camp, this spiritual walk, what God allows in your life, isn't meant to embarrass you. It's meant to equip you. It's not about shame. It's about preparation. He's not trying to show you what's wrong with you so he can reject you. He's showing you what's in you so that he can transform you. You don't grow by hiding your weakness. You grow by surrendering to the one who has already conquered them. That kind of, like I said, it really kind of hits home to me that I have been missing opportunities to get better by not even talking about how I was successful before. Even if I did pass a test, I haven't gone into, okay, what could I have done better this time? And so by not doing that, I should say, I'm going to respond the same way the next time. And the enemy knows that, so he's going to throw something different at me, because he knows, like, hey, this is what he's prepared for. And if you guys deployed the same way every time that drone came, the enemy really they don't even need to ask where you'll be, because they know. No. So they would set up, if they wanted to know how you responded and you deployed the same way, they could set up snipers at key points and take out people because they know where they're going to be. Yeah. And as you said, you practice until you can't get it wrong. So you were going to be perfect in getting to that spot.
We was going to be there. We was going to be there in a timely manner.
Yeah. And so that element of predictability becomes then a weakness rather than a strength. Mm-hmm. So you have to learn to cover the cards in your hands, if you will, spiritually. Ask God, pray to God, ask God, teach me a new way to respond to this. Teach me a new way to respond, and not out of anger. So that's gold. That's gold, dude. So this has been really good for me. I don't know about y'all, but this is blessing me personally. So next point, situational awareness. Recon tells you where the enemy is. Situational awareness tells you where the enemy moves. Peter says, be sober and be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walks about seeking whom he may devour. So I know that situational awareness is big kind of in your current role as a sheriff's deputy. So when you come into a situation where, you might have gotten dispatch telling you, here's what's going on, go to this place, here's kind of what tools do you bring that the average person wouldn't when you walk onto the scene of the crime, or when you walk into a situation where you don't exactly know what's going on?
So one of the key things that they try to teach us is something called the OODA loop, OODA. Orient, observe, orient, decide, act. And the loop means we continue this cycle. So when I show up on a call, I take the information that's given to me via the radio, understanding that what they said on the radio is most likely not the situation that I'm walking into. And when I get there, I first observe. I observe the situation. I orient myself. I start to concoct a plan in my mind how I'm going to handle this situation. I decide, and then I act. Well, the reason why you do the OODA loop is because the facts now won't be the facts 10 seconds from now. And the longer you take to act, the more prone you are to the facts evolving right in front of you. And that's why the goal is always to take action as fast as you can. Because by doing that, a lot of times some people may say the police look like they were heavy-handed in this particular situation. Well, me going hands-on when I first come in actually is a benefit both to my safety and the person's safety, because if you allow that situation to go on and you allow them to get more angry, now the force I used at the beginning might not be the force I can use 5 minutes from now. And the longer that situation goes, now we've got from a situation where I could have went hands-on the minute I came in the door, neutralized the situation, and been done, to a deadly force situation because we've let this situation stew for way too long. And so we use that. That's one of our huge things. And then vigilance. Vigilance is a huge thing because in law enforcement now, the person you're dealing with might not even be the person who means you harm. So you have to be one of those people who can deal with the situation in front of you while also being cautious about what's going on around you. I always look for exit routes. So if I get out and I'm talking to somebody, or I'm going up to somebody's house, and let's say we've got a domestic going on, do I want to stand right in the doorway of their house when an active domestic is going on and they know the police are coming? So instead of standing right in front of the door, I may step off the porch where I have a brick wall beside me, so that's giving me some sort of cover. And I'm always thinking about escape routes. If they start shooting at me, where can I go from where I'm at now to a safer location? Because once the situation starts, we're in it for the long haul. So once the situation starts, I'm in there until the situation ends. And the goal is to be as safe as I can be, most importantly, because I want to go home to my family. I hope to send this person home to their family, if the situation goes the way we would like it to go. But always looking for an escape route, looking for a position, a powerful position to fight from. I always want to fight from an advantageous position. You never want to give the enemy the advantage.
Phew.
So everything we do is trying to give ourselves the advantage. They always tell us action is faster than reaction. So I can't react to what you're doing faster than I can just react myself. And so now you're playing catch up to me instead of me playing catch up to you.
So the scripture that came to mind is that the name of the Lord is a strong tower and the righteous run to it and are safe. So from what you were saying, when I react in these situations, I need to do it from a place of strength. And that place of strength spiritually is rarely what your body is deciding. And your body will have you reacting in all kinds of ways that are not places of strength, but that leave you vulnerable. So as when I react spiritually, it needs to be from a position of strength. There is no greater strength than God. There is no greater strength than reacting from a place of relative safety. And that's God. That's going to be the word of God. That's going to be operating from what God says. You will always be good. You mentioned vigilance, and that 1 Peter 5:8, be sober, be vigilant. Be vigilant. So keep your head on a swivel, spiritually as well. Something you said, that the person you're dealing with may not be the person who means you harm. And I think that for many of us is something we need to keep in mind, even when dealing with people in church situations, because though we wrestle we wrestle not against the flesh, but we wrestle against spiritual wickedness in high places. The person that you're dealing with is not always the one who means you active harm. And so by focusing on this person who we're having whatever interaction with and not focusing on our actual enemy, we leave ourselves open to attack. And so that's one of the things that we have to do as well. Keep your head on a swivel spiritually. Keep your eyes on who the actual enemy is. Keep your eyes on, there may be people who you're talking to who are just innocent bystanders. There may be people who were misinformed and who are reacting from that place. So one thing you mentioned as well, you have to react quickly, because if you nip it in the bud, if you catch it at its beginning, it's a lot easier than once everybody's got riled up. It's a lot easier, and that's spiritually as well. The longer you are in something spiritually, if you're dealing with anything, if it's sin, if it's temptation, if it's anger, the longer you leave yourself in that situation without trying to deal with it, the harder it is to get out of it. The longer you stay in, the harder it is to escape. And so we have to make sure that we're acting and act quickly. This is our lives that are at stake. For some of you, spiritually, your lives are at stake, and how you react now could be the difference from getting out of this situation quickly or something that's going to affect you for generations to come, who your children are going to have to deal with. So that is something, that advice that I'm taking to heart myself. Act as quickly as possible and as decisively as possible.
Yes.
In the OODA loop that you mentioned, the D is decision. So act with decisiveness, from a place of strength, which is act from God, but act with that strength and act in a way that God will be pleased with.
Yes.
So I think that you can take that anywhere you are in your spiritual journey. And one thing that kind of from the even military standpoint, you start out at one rank, but to advance to a different rank, you go through more testing, you go through more training.
Yes.
So how does that kind of play into where you want to be as far as even developing as a person? So you rose in ranks. So you didn't start out at the rank that you ended up with.
No.
Okay. So how do you talk to how you kind of rise in the ranks?
So to the different branches of the military, it varies. If I'm not mistaken, some branches test to be promoted. The Marine Corps does not test for you to be promoted. You are judged based off of your proficiency and conduct in three different areas. So you have your proficiency and conduct marks, which is a 4.0, 4.0, which would be an average person. That means you do what you're told. You don't really go above and beyond. A 5.0, 5.0, you'd be a rock star if you got 5.0, 5.0s. And then they take it to the physical testing, the CFT, the combat fitness test, and the PFT, the physical fitness test. And you get ranks. So everything for that is out of 300. So you've got sit-ups, 3 miles, and pull-ups. And wherever you rank on there, if you did 100 crunches and 26 pull-ups and an 18-minute 3 mile, you would have a perfect 300. If you don't get a perfect, let's say you got a 260. Well, me and this person are now competing for a promotion, and the Marine Corps is going to give the benefit of the doubt to that person. He has proven that when it mattered, he was superior in one of those areas. They also set what they call cutting scores. So they look at the entire Marine Corps, like personnel, and they say we've got 10,000 people in zone for Lance Corporal, and they all average a score of 1,500 total. Well, we want the upper echelon of this group, so we're going to make the cutting score 1,800. So anybody over an 1,800 would get promoted. Okay. Anybody below that, you will remain at that rank until the next board comes around and you are retested. And you're only stacked up against the people that are currently in zone for that rank. So a 1,600 might not get me promoted now, but a 1,600 might get me promoted 6 months from now, because it's kind of like a roller coaster. At some points the cutting score is really high based off personnel and how many people are leaving the Marine Corps. The cutting score might be 1,500. And so they try to keep it competitive. They believe competition breeds success, is what they believe. And so if we just give it to anybody who hits a certain score, are we really promoting the best and brightest to lead the Marine Corps?
So kind of spiritually, and I'm not talking about like ranking in churches or whatever, but for that next level in your life, for where God is taking you next, you're tested. Like you go through testing. It is not a pen and pencil test, but the way you conduct yourself in the test will determine sometimes how you are blessed after the test. So it's incumbent upon all of us to make sure that when we go through these tests, that we react in a way that is pleasing to God, because we all want to be blessed. We want for what we've gone through to mean something. And I think that's something that everybody can identify with. Again, no matter where you are spiritually, we all want what we've gone through to mean something. And I think that making sure that we pass the test and pass it with some class, some dignity, like some strength, that is one of the most important things that we can do. We actually kind of segued into our last point, the rules of engagement. So what do you do once you know the enemy and know yourself, and you stay aware in a real-time fight? You fight, but God's way. So again, the 2 Corinthians 10:4, the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but they are mighty. So when the fight is real, the rules are divine. You can't react in a fleshly way. You can't react you talked about this, like from a civilian standpoint, police action might look one way, but like we rarely consider that, hey, this person wants to go home to their family too. And so like you have to react as an officer in the way that you're trained, and that's not the way a civilian is trained. Like it's completely different. And so in our spiritual walk, like we can't react in the way our instincts tell us to. We have to go through this training, and that comes from knowing God's word, knowing what God is looking for out of you. And you only know that by reading his word. That's one of the best things that we can do, is just to not be passive.
Yes.
And if you'll kind of, as we end, kind of talk to us about like acting decisively, and you can talk to it from your military background, your police background, or just like kind of your viewpoint, combining those two. But what is the way in which you've been taught to act decisively, and how does that look in different situations?
So, acting decisively, one of the huge things for us is the minute you get on scene, or it's the same way in the military where I was nuclear weapons security. We were similar to the police, where we were responding to something. We were very rarely ever there when it happened, when it occurred. So there was no de-escalation in that regard where we could prevent something from happening. It's already gone down before we get there. And the first thing that they teach us is your command presence. and that is taking command when you get on scene. And I'm sure you've all seen, all police officers are not the same, and you have some who don't really have command presence, and command presence really just comes down to how do you dress? How do you look when you show up on scene? They conducted a study, and they preach it to us at the police academy, that there was a man on the run in one of these states, and he decided he wanted to die death by cop. That is what he had decided. And he had had 3 encounters with the police before he decided to shoot the police. And they asked him, why? Why did you choose the one you shot? And he gave a synopsis that basically said, when I got pulled over in Georgia, that state trooper came up, his uniform was pressed, he looked a certain way, he looked professional, he looked like he didn't take any crap. He looked like one of those people where I wasn't sure that it was going to turn out in my favor and that I was going to be able to do what I wanted to do in the situation. So I did nothing. And then they asked him the same thing about a female officer that he had an encounter with. And he said the same thing. She was a woman and she was kind of small, but her hair was pulled back into a tight bun. Her uniform was form-fitting. Her shoes were shined. Her badges were shined. She looked like she took her job very seriously, and the way she presented herself gave me pause, because as a man, I didn't want to be the guy who got taken to jail by this woman because I wasn't able to do what I wanted to do to her. And then the third cop, who unfortunately succumbed to his injuries, uniform was disgusting, boots weren't shined, cruiser was dirty, and the guy decided in that moment, oh, he looks like somebody that I could take. And that's what he did. And so looking a certain way is half the battle. Presenting yourself as somebody of a higher level of respect. People in our community, generally, they respond to that. I have cases all the time where I get a mental health warrant, and in the mental health warrant, it says this person is known to fight, this person is known to, do whatever. And I get to the hospital and the nurse gives me the same rundown, and then they pop the door open and I start talking to the guy, and they stand up, they turn around, they let me handcuff him, we walk out like nothing ever happened. And maybe he just wasn't feeling like fighting that day. Sometimes it might be he's looking at me and thinking, man, this guy looks professional, the way he talks, the way he carries himself. I don't want to try anything with him because
I wouldn't try for real.
So I've been blessed, and I've been fortunate not to have a lot of encounters like some of the people that I work with, but carrying yourself in a manner in which people respect you is half the battle in law enforcement.
That's good. That's good. I think that the parallel kind of for us spiritually is, one, see how you present yourself. Make sure that you are intentional about what you're doing, the decisions that you're making, how you present yourself, kind of what you go through in life. Be decisional, be intentional about it.
Yes.
And I think that a lot of times will help us even in our encounters with other people. If we're just intentional about ourselves. And so kind of in that kind of along that vein, that's really kind of why we're doing the series, is because we need to be intentional about our spirituality. For all too long, so many of us have been, like you talked about at the beginning, where we did the bare minimum. And spiritually, we showed up, we went to church, we just did the bare minimum, what it took. But I think in this next season, God is looking for something different from each one of us. So as we always do, I'm going to give you a chance if you have anything you want to end with that you think we should know, if you have anything that you kind of think will be helpful for us, for our audience, if you give you kind of the last word, and we'll go from there.
Just one of the important things I think we should all do is know ourselves and seek self-improvement, because we know ourselves better than anybody else. And another thing, and this is a thing that I used to struggle with a lot, is taking constructive criticism. It is important and it is paramount, because a lot of times, I would say in the church, these people mean well. You know, granted, there's always somebody who is a hater. You know, those people exist. So I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
But there are people, like he said, him and my mom talk to each other. And they have a relationship so much so that if one of them were to say, I liked what you did, but you could have did this better, I think this would have segued into, you know, your next point a little bit better, and it would have kind of, you know, tied everything together. They have the relationship so much so that they're not like, you know what, he's hating on my message, you know, like, no, this person actually means well. This person actually wants what's best for you. And sometimes we have to get out of our own heads about overstating our importance to the world and thinking that we mean so much more than we mean. Yeah. And allow people to help us. There are people a lot longer, just like in law enforcement and ministers and so forth. There are people a lot farther in their walk, in their career, in their walk with Christ, and they have nuggets to give you. And then also the people who you would say don't have nuggets. I've learned you can learn something from anybody. Yeah. Even if you're just learning what not to do to somebody. That's real. I've met plenty of law enforcement officers that are like, I learned something new today. I'll never do that. Yeah. I'll never do what he did. And then you meet other people and they give you a perspective that you've maybe not even considered. Some of the stuff I've learned through the years, I tell to my wife, and it's things she would never think about. Just simple things like when you're driving your car, as long as you're far enough back from the car in front of you that you can see both their rear wheels, you can always go left or right. What happens in a lot of these carjackings, they pull right up on you, or you pull right up on them, and you now have nowhere to go. They hop out, you're trying to back up, and a car's right up on you. Whew. If you park where you can see both wheels, there's always an escape. And so it's like little nuggets like that I learned from a police officer who's like 60 years old and about to retire, and he asked me one day, why are you so close to that car? I was like, well, I'm just driving. And he told me that, and it has been ingrained in me that I never pull that close to anybody because I always want to make sure I've got somewhere to go. Yeah. So just be teachable would be the biggest point.
Wow. That is serious. And spiritually, that's tough. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like it's not tough to be teachable. It is incredibly difficult to maintain teachability, to maintain the fact that you're always a student. But those of us who are the most successful are those of us who are always teachable. And I don't say that because I still struggle with constructive criticism. Is something I struggle with. So I make sure to seek it out because I know it's a struggle for me.
Yeah, I struggle with it too. I have to seek it out from people who I respect, and oftentimes there's people running around giving advice that you didn't ask for, and that's the kind of advice that I have always struggled with. Is like you felt it in your spirit to come up to me and tell me something, and so I seek it. I seek it out from people who I aspire to be like. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't want to be that person, but there are people who are in their walk with Christ, and I aspire to be that. I aspire to pray and read the Bible and have an understanding like that person. Let me go ask this person a question, and they may have to be harsh on me, but I'd rather you be harsh now, so that I have somewhere to go and I have some improvements that I can make versus, you know, judgment day come and then it'd be harsh and there's no recourse at that point.
No recourse. So thank you so much, James. I appreciate you. So this series, every lesson will end with a challenge. So we got 4 challenges. First one, ask the Holy Spirit to highlight where the enemy has been moving unnoticed in your life. That recon that they've been doing, that areas that they've been operating, ask God to help you see those areas. Second one, fast for 1 meal this week and journal what triggers you emotionally or spiritually. For some of you, that might not be that big of a challenge. So if you normally fast 1 meal, fast a day and just see what comes up. See what comes out of what you are dealing with, what you're struggling with. Third one, pray Psalms 139, 23 through 24. Search me, O God, if there be any wicked way in me. So pray that scripture and ask God to search you and find out what's in you that you don't know. And the last one is text someone to pray for your blind spots. Invite Recon into your life. And so this is to your last point. Find somebody who you trust. Find somebody who you admire. Find somebody who looks like they're doing well. And sometimes I've noticed this, like you may text them or you may reach out to them and they might say, okay, so I may look like I have it all figured out, but that's the area where I struggle. So it's not always, sometimes they are that vigilant about an area because they've had to fight in that area.
Yeah.
But find somebody that you trust. And this is not, don't tell everybody your business because that's dangerous.
Yeah.
That's dangerous. But there needs to be someone in your life that you can go to, that you can talk to. So text someone to pray for your blind spots and invite Recon into your life. Look for that scrutiny within yourself. And if you find it, so it's kind of in your lesson from the drill instructor, if you do it, somebody else doesn't have to do it for you. And so spiritually, what that looks like is ask God about this stuff before it's an issue. Ask God to show you before it's a crisis. And then you can work on it and you can be prepared to deal with it. So again, James, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate having you. Appreciate your input. You have been invaluable. I pray this has been a blessing to you. We will put James's Cash App information on the screen. If James has spoken to you, if he has addressed anything that you prayed about, if this has blessed you at all, don't even reach out for us. Please go be a blessing to James. Please sow into his life. He didn't have to do this, so I appreciate you taking the time to do so. I always ask that you guys be a blessing to the folks that you bring on. So again, thank you. And as we always end with here, Eastgate Ministries, come as you are, but expect to leave transformed.